Happy New Year and welcome back to Carl and Rick Talk Risk. Hey Rick, Happy New Year.
Yo, Happy New Year.
Hey. Um, so uh we've had a topic on our minds for a couple of weeks, and this is the first time we've been able to record. So
Correction,
um
you've had a topic on your mind for a couple of weeks.
you got me
I,
excited, Rick.
I, I, I spent the last 5 minutes thinking about it. So,
Well, okay. The background, if I remember right, is after the last time we recorded, we were like comparing injuries or something, and you mentioned one on your arm. And that was from a meatpacking injury. And then we started talking about jobs. And then we decided, hey, let's stop talking about this and record. So yeah, it's been a few weeks, Christmas break, New Year's. So here we are again. We want to talk about jobs we've had and somehow figure out how it's led us to where we are today. Maybe we get there, maybe we don't. But nevertheless, it'll be very interesting. Rick, I have an opening question for you. What was the first job you were ever paid to do?
well, um, paid or make money. That's a bit of a distinction. So,
So, okay.
both of them were grade four. I started collecting pop bottles. We lived relatively close to a high school,
Okay.
and I would run home from elementary school, and all the students would be in a park across from our house, and I would collect pop bottles from them back when pop bottles were recyclable. And I would also run home uh, when there's a snowstorm. So I got paid to shovel people's steps and walkways. And um, both of them were harder than they seemed, but
Yeah.
they set me up for a life of toil.
Yeah. Um, Interesting. Okay. Yeah. Now you got me thinking because yeah, there's a difference for me too. The first ways I got paid where my mom made great lunch sandwiches for me, and I wasn't always very hungry, and I would sell them to people.
Oh no! I mean, anyone who knows me, first off, anyone who knows my background knows that my mother never, ever, ever, ever made a lunch for me.
Okay.
Okay, and B, I would never sell any of my own food. Okay, like I mean, food is
Yeah.
yeah.
Non-tradable. Yeah. But I quickly want to talk about the first job I was ever paid to do. I wasn't supposed to be, so this is the beginning of my regulator infractions. Was teaching golf to people. I was pretty good at golf as a teenager. I was on the national team back in Zimbabwe, and so I would teach people, mostly beginners and mostly business men and women, who uh, Zimbabwe, a lot of deals still get done on the golf course. They wanted to improve their golf and enjoy themselves, and so I would teach them, and and there is a thread from there to where I am today. I would come up with all these weird ways to hit a golf ball. So I didn't just tell them to stand there and hit a golf ball. I said, well, here's a volleyball. Hold this between your elbows. This is going to make you squeeze and not let your chicken elbow come up when you're swinging a golf club. So do that. Okay, hit it 3 times. Now take it away. Now try hitting a golf ball. And I would sort of help them, uh, um, you know, get into the mentality they need to swing a golf club by tricking them somehow. Or I would put a rope in front of them, parallel to the ground, and say, okay, now hit under that rope. Because a lot of beginners, they want to lift the ball up in the air, but you don't want to do that when you're hitting golf. When you're hitting a golf ball, you want to hit down on the ball and create the lift with the downstroke, and that puts backspin on the ball. So you want to hit it as low as possible to begin with. So, and I still see myself doing that to this day, right? Tricking myself into enjoying certain activities, making things fun for myself, and trying to make my work fun for other people too. So I still see myself kind of. structuring my work life like that? What?
You see, I was head pro at several different tennis clubs.
Yeah.
And what people don't realize is the main job of a tennis pro at a country club is not teaching people to play tennis. It's to keep the ladies who do lunch spending money. And so I would sit around and basically listen to them talk about sex toys and edible underwear. And that was how I spent my days as a tennis pro. And that's pretty consistent amongst tennis clubs. Okay.
Interesting.
The head pro is to keep people in the bar drinking. And the best way to do that is to get them a little bit of exercise so that they can say, oh, I've definitely earned this martini, and then
Oh,
get them going. So
yeah,
yeah, there was yeah.
it's
I've
interesting.
probably
Yeah.
said way too much about that already, but
No, that
uh,
I think that beats my story. But I was 17, so that probably wasn't gonna work.
well,
Um,
I was 16 when I started,
oh,
so yeah,
okay.
there was probably some illegal stuff about the conversations in my presence, but
Yeah,
that never stopped anyone.
we should have given a disclaimer. Um, most unusual job. What springs to mind for you, Rick?
Oh, as a consultant, I've done some pretty unusual things. Um, I was once asked to design a hedge on a piece of property for one of the islands that were going to be built in the Middle East out of, the dredging.
Yeah, yeah.
And of course, the prince was writing a poem, and one of my clients had bought one of the letters of the poem, but the prince was thinking of changing the poem, which my client wanted a hedge against his letter now being less valuable. Um, that was probably the weirdest,
Let's
uh,
say.
or at least risk related. I wasn't expecting the weirdest. So, what
Yeah.
was your weirdest?
Um, I had a pretty weird summer job that I really enjoyed and kind of fell into when I was working in the States. I worked in a pizza shop for a whole summer, but the interesting twist is nobody in the kitchen spoke English, and I didn't speak Spanish. And it was great. It was such, I mean, I was just telling you about my Christmas, and my Christmas was very similar. It was a lot of languages, none of which I understood. Um, but yeah, we had to figure out as a team how to communicate with each other. And I'll tell you what, by the end of the summer, not only did I know how to make a pretty good pizza dough, but I knew everything in the kitchen in Spanish. I've since forgotten, but that was interesting, and I one of the first team environments I was in where like you can barely talk to people. How are you going to get things done? And we also had a tough shift and hard manager who wanted things done right away. And so it was probably the first time I felt real pressure as well. I didn't get that in university, but I did get it at my pizza job.
Well, one of the funnest things I had to do when I was in university was I was paid by a wealthy family to tutor their kid who was in grade 3.
Okay.
Now, the kid actually was doing high school level math, but failing grade 3 math. So, first off, I learned something
Huh.
there. And because I had the long hair at the time, and this was in Texas, the kid psychologist actually recommended me because, apparently there was some conforming issues with the kid who was brilliant and probably
Okay.
just born out of his skull
Yeah.
in the school system. So we started off in a classroom where I would rate an equation on the board or a problem on the board. He would solve it. I'd race to the other side of the room, rate another problem. Then it was like a Bruce Willis movie. I'd throw chairs in his way so he couldn't keep up. And then we'd start racing through the building, trying to find empty classrooms with a chalkboard so I could write a problem. He'd have to find me and solve the problem. And yeah, I got paid really good money for doing that for 2 nights a week for an hour a piece.
Huh.
It was my introduction to the education system.
Ah, interesting. Okay. Oh, so that's a very clear line. And it seems like you actually responded pretty well to it.
And his parents were thrilled, and
Huh.
I'm not exactly sure the university the janitor of the university building I used was particularly pleased, but
Yeah.
no.
Very interesting. Yeah, and I wonder how many people are like that. I mean,
I think there's more
uh,
than we think.
yeah, yeah, I agree with you, and I think the same goes for work, don't you? I mean, uh, I think some people treat it, and some managers treat it as a boring activity that you just have to do this. But so many people respond well to you know question it if you don't think it needs to be done, if you think it's being done better by somebody else, if you don't have enough time. I've seen in every job I've worked where I have more autonomy over what I'm doing and whether it needs to be done. I've enjoyed what I do because I get to decide for myself. But where it's sort of you have to do this because it has to be done, mentally you check out a bit. And I mean, same with teachers, right? If somebody just tells you, well, this is the way it is, you yeah, you color within the lines without really thinking
Yeah.
through things. Yeah. Anyway, um, um, you had tell us about the meatpacking job. I'm curious about that one.
Well, it wasn't meat packing. It was loading and unloading meat trucks.
Okay.
And that summer, I actually had three jobs. Okay, one, I was uh, head tennis pro at a club, albeit a much smaller club. Uh, on the weekends, I loaded and unloaded meat trucks. So the trucks would come in Friday night uh, from Montreal. We would unload them and then reload them for distribution to all the grocery stores on Monday morning.
Okay.
Um, And then I also worked for my father building logging roads. And uh, loading meat trucks it's not easy. Like,
Mm,
a side of cow is heavy.
yeah.
And,
Yeah.
you can't see it, but a side of cow is also sharp
Yeah.
because if you drop it, you're going to get a nice little scar. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, and working for my father building logging roads, boy, my GPA never had to worry thereafter because I determined that manual labor was not what I wanted uh, to do. And
Yeah.
and and this sounds really bad, and this sounds really elitist, but it gave me an appreciation for people who work hard.
Mm,
Okay, people who do things like roofing, construction work, movers, anything with manual labor. My hat is off to them, and
mm,
that's why I think that we forget at times as quote unquote white collar workers is
yeah.
we have it really freaking easy.
Yeah. Yeah. No, exactly. But you raised a good point. A lot of these jobs, yeah, you learn something that maybe you carry through, and you can thread the needle. But you also find out things you absolutely don't want to do, that you're absolutely not suited to, and that's why it's a good thing to have a variety of jobs and find out, well, this just isn't
Yeah,
for me. I admire the people that do it, but I just can't. I don't want to. Yeah, no, I know what you mean. Yeah. Um,
for instance, I as as you know, my background's in physics.
Yeah.
And I was getting my PhD in physics, and I was transferring from a school in the States to a school in Canada in order to get married. Okay?
Okay.
Because my wife didn't want to be, the wife of a graduate student in the US. Uh, Getting married was a good decision. Moving from graduate school in the US to Canada in physics was a disaster. Anyhow, that summer, as the interim of switching schools, is I worked at a nuclear power plant. And I was hyper excited. I thought, wow, this is what I want to do. It's related to my area of research. This is so great. The compensation was right. So
Yeah.
I was given a task on the first day, basically for a can-do reactor. At night, when there's not much demand for power, you kind of experiment. I'm using that term loosely with the plant. And basically, I was to produce printouts of how we responded to various scenarios, etc. So I was given this task at roughly 8:30 after my orientation on how to whiz in the bottle and how to wear my dosimeter. And around 10 o'clock, I go to my supervisor. I go, is this kind of what you wanted? And he looks really despondent. And he's like, oh. And he has one of these, oh my God, I can't believe I hired this idiot. And I go, what's wrong? He goes, well, this was supposed to take you 4 months.
Oh shit.
And so basically, my job for the entire rest of the summer consisted of three things. One, if we had a politician or dignitary show up, I would sit at this terminal and spit out graphs showing how wonderful our capabilities were. Two, whiz in the bottle each week. And three, don't stand in one place too long. I mean, they literally had nothing for me to do. And everything was so regulated. Um, it was ridiculous. And yeah, that turned me off working in a nuclear power station for the rest of my life.
Yeah. Expectations didn't quite match reality there.
Well, literally what we did, and I was put with the professional staff, was we did things like, you have to remember laptops were still relatively new at the time. We'd program laptops to test people's hearing.
Oh.
I absolutely nothing to do with nuclear power, but just it was something to keep your mind alive.
Okay.
Okay, so
Okay.
did a lot of programming of video games. Uh, be, be,
Interesting.
be, because calling a spade, if the reactor's working like it's supposed to, there's really not a whole hell of a lot to do.
Okay. Okay.
you know?
Huh.
Anyhow,
Interesting. Yeah.
that was probably had nothing to do with risk, but anyhow.
Well, nuclear power. Yeah. Um, trying to think of other weird jobs I've had. My first job in the US was bizarre. First of all, it was a couple of weeks long, and there was a building that was going to be torn down. It was the old library building. This was at a small school in West Virginia, in the hills of West Virginia. And our job was to archive everything. So pull everything out of folders, all the paper, put it in one place, and make sure it was stored. The thing is, the floor was collapsing. Why they hired students and not professionals to do this? Well, I mean, cost probably. But you really had to watch where you were walking because you could see where the floor had been, right, clear across the room. And the whole middle part was completely folded in. It was completely crashed. And if you put your foot in the wrong place, you could go into. So we were out there with sticks prodding in different places to make sure that the floor could handle us. So you could say there was some risk risk management activities going on that one. Yeah, so that's
a
quite
job
bizarre.
where I had some risk, which seems like it has no risk associated with it. And also the job I learned the most at. I learned way more in working at this job for all of 1 week than I learned in all of my years getting my MBA and my PhD in business.
Okay.
Was in vacuum cleaner sales.
Okay.
So I did the job for a week. Okay.
Okay.
And so my final day, and by the way, when you sell vacuum cleaners, and we're talking door to door, you're not going door to door. They, make the appointments for you, but
okay.
You're not exactly going to the nicest of places. Because the people in the nice places either already have a vacuum cleaner that they're perfectly happy with, or they have the means that if they need a vacuum cleaner, they just go out and get whatever they want. Okay? And generally, they also don't respond to high pressure sales. So the reality is, and the sad part is a lot of the sales tactics are geared towards, less well-off people.
Yeah.
So on my final night, I'll never forget. I'm in this house that is down by a boatyard, and not the yacht club. Boatyard. Okay.
Yeah.
And they're taking a boat out of the water, and this house is right next to the boatyard. They're taking a boat out of the water, and for whatever reason, it explodes. And so these people are having their house literally being watered down by the fire department so it doesn't go up. And of course, it's a wooden house and it's 800 years old and, hasn't been properly painted. It's just a matchstick waiting to go off.
Yeah.
And I phone in DNS, demonstration no sell. And you have to remember, this is well before cell phones. So I'm literally in the house while the fire department is there. You got to get out. You got to get out. I got to make this call. I got to make this call. Because you always had a phone from the house to say whether you made a sale or DNS, demonstration no sale. And I'm trying to explain the situation to my boss, and he's saying, no, you got to stay there. There'll be lots of soot. There'll be lots of dirt. They need that vacuum cleaner. You'll be able to have a really powerful demonstration. And meanwhile, these people are freaking out. They're trying to grab whatever they can of value. And I say some words that we probably shouldn't say on this podcast, and I take the fireman's direction and walk out of the house and never looked back on that job again. But I learned more in that 1 week on that job than I learned in all my years in business school, both as a student, as a researcher, and as a professor. I'm often asked in class by my MBA students, what's my number one advice for them? And if they've never worked a sales job, I tell them, walk out of this class right now, get a sales job, and come back in 18 months. And I think that's relevant for risk management, because in risk management, the vast majority of people in risk management have never had a sales job.
Yeah.
And you talked about tricking people in golf into helping them to, learn and probably more accurately relearn habits that will make them better golfers. That's what we got to do a lot in risk management, is we got to communicate in such a way. We got to learn how to communicate in such a way that we can put people into learning new habits. And that's sales 101.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's also understanding people's emotions and understanding why people do and don't do what you want them to.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or what you need them to, which should be more accurate.
Yeah. That's what was springing to my mind, is you really start to understand how people behave in those situations. It's really a which you can carry on to the trading floor, right? How people react to markets and to each other and so on. I would say despite me being in risk now, my undergraduate degree was in marketing. And I did one job interview.
You slimy bastard.
I know. I don't like to talk about it, Rick. I did one job interview in Dallas, Texas, and I basically rode along with a AT&T Uverse, which is like a whole bundle of channels, selling that really door to door. So no appointments, knocking on doors and trying to sell this stuff. And I mean, it was a nightmare. I was like, I'm going straight back to school. But it was interesting. I still remember things that happened that day, and I don't have the best memory because it really left an impression. And you really got to see people up close, how they react to like, yeah, sales situations. And the funniest thing we had, we knocked on one person's door, and it's like Dallas McMansions, right? So from a mile away, we heard a scream at us, "Get out of here! I don't want it." We're like, okay, fine. We kept walking to the next house, and a little kid jogged out and came and got us and said, come back. And their parent apologized to us and said, I don't know what came over me, but my child reminded me that I go to church on Sundays, and that behavior would not be acceptable there. So hilarious. Their kid had basically guilted them into bringing us back. I don't think we made the sale, but still, it was.
But here's the thing, cable TV sells and risk management, selling cable subscriptions and selling risk management. People react to them a lot of times the exact same. They know they need cable subscriptions. They know they need risk management. But the last thing that they want to do is hear a sales pitch about a cable subscription or hear the details of a new risk management implementation plan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That you've got to be able to communicate in a way that appeals to them and makes sense, and not in your technical language. It's valuable skill. Yeah. All right, Rick, this has been fun, as I expected. So
I'm glad you enjoyed it. I've been bored out of my skull.
Well, it was a nice break anyway. It's probably our longest episode ever, so it's a nice start to the new year.
Well, you don't want to hear about my 30 other jobs that I've had.
I heard about that list. Yeah. Folks, this will be our 2025 podcast itinerary. Rick's odd jobs. Okay. Well, we'll be back soon with another episode. And until then, this has been Carl and Rick Talks Risk. Have a good, happy 2025. Cheers.